Hello, good morning, and thank you for joining us for today's session. Can I just check that everybody can see the PowerPoint and hear me clearly? And if somebody can just let me know in the chat so I can just, before I continue. Perfect. So welcome to today's session. Just before we start, just to let you know that the webinar will be recorded. So if anybody does use the voice and kind of wants to speak, or it kind of will be recorded. So just to make you all aware of that. So welcome, and I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction of myself first of all, so you all know who I am. My name's Stacey McDermott. I'm currently working as a secondary school SENCO and designated teacher for looked after children in a multi-academy trust in the Oldham area. My experience has come from both mainstream and specialist settings, so I've got quite a broad range, and currently within my role I do kind of go and support other SENCOs in other settings as well. Education, I kind of started my career always knowing I wanted to go into teaching, always very passionate about special educational needs. And I went to university to do my BA honours and then my PGCE. Quite quickly, I was only in education for a year before I then went on to do my SENCO award. And then quite quickly after that, did my master's in inclusive education and special educational needs. Still to this day, I have got a passion for learning because I just love learning about special educational needs. I learn something new every single day from the children that I work with, and it's just a pleasure to kind of spend my time in this environment and help and support others. So hopefully today's session will be really useful and you'll take something from that. Yeah, so the first thing I'd like to do is would like you to think of a behavioural issue that you've recently had, and you can write this down on a piece of paper. We're not going to share it publicly, but I just want it's just for something that I'd like you to do for your own personal gain during this session. And it can be something within the classroom if you're a teacher or you work in education. It could be something if you're a parent to do with your child. I'd just like you to think about a behavioural issue that potentially you would like support with, or you'd like to think, oh, how could I have dealt with that differently, or why did that happen? I'm just going to write that down and keep it safe to the end of the session. Just give you a minute or so just to write that down or just to have a think. Okay, so we all know behaviour. Well, might not all know, but hopefully we will all know by the end of this session. Behaviour is communication. We see a behaviour, but actually what we don't see is what's underneath that behaviour and the reason for that behaviour. That can be from anything from an academic need, from a learning need, from an additional need, from something to do with external factors such as home life. There are lots of things underlying, and we can't fix all of them straight away, especially in the classroom. But what we can do is we can support children to control that behaviour and to support their needs better. And hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have some strategies to take away that maybe that you could try and see if they have an impact to support you further. So behaviour is communication, and what we are seeing nationally, why we're so passionate about behaviour, and especially those with special educational needs, is because if you look here, now these two statistics are from 2018, but the one below is from 21 to 22. Children with special educational needs are more likely to have suspensions, to have detentions, to have permanent exclusions. That is a rising figure. If we look here, the suspension rate for pupils within education healthcare plan, 17.6. And if we compare that to those without an education healthcare plan, it's 18.59, and then compare that to those without any SEN needs, it's 4.69. Now, to me, that is terrifying. It's really scares me, because why are our children with special educational needs being so disadvantaged? Because what's happening there? There's got to be something happening. There's got to be a pattern, and we need to address it, and we need to address it quickly, because if you can see by the national data here, it's an ongoing trend. So if we look back, and if we have to consider 2019 to 20 and 20 to 21, the data obviously is going to be impacted by the pandemic and national lockdowns. So that data is not, I've compared 2018, 19 to 21, 22, when things were back to relatively as normal as they can be. And as you can see from the suspension rate, it's on the increase again. And luckily, if we look at the permanent exclusion rate, it has slightly dropped. There could be lots of reasons for this. It could be that schools are under pressure to making sure they're addressing need, and the actual exclusion panel is a little bit more rigorous, and you've got to prove you've supported that need in a little bit more detail now. Also, needs are being identified better, and SENCOs and senior leadership teams are considering needs further, but we've still got a long way to go. We've still got to address that difference. If we look at that in comparison to no SEN, again, it's scary. It's scary data. So there's lots of legislation and the laws, and I'm not going to read this out section by section, but as an overall, schools have a responsibility to make sure children with special educational needs have high standards of curriculum, have high expectations, but their needs are met, and reasonable adjustments are put in place around their learning needs, but also around their behaviour needs. And I think probably in the past, there's been more focus on adaptations being made for learning needs and academic needs in the classroom, and not actually the approach to behaviour, which hopefully today I'm going to specifically focus on how we're addressing behaviour and changing those habits and changing that pattern of routine that hopefully might make some difference. There's legislation now, the Equality Act, the Children's and Family Acts. It's our legal responsibility as schools to make sure we're putting this into place. So as parents, as teachers, and as educators and professionals, we need to be making sure we have the right systems and communication in place to make sure the right provisions put in place. So as a practitioner, so you might be a parent, you might be a professional, you might be a teacher, please comment in the chat if you wish. If not, you can just be thinking and reflecting, what is your biggest barrier with the behaviour in your setting? And that could be in the classroom or outside the classroom. We're not restricted to just in the classroom at the moment. Hopefully, once you've identified what your biggest barrier is, then we can kind of signpost you into, or you might find the information in this session today, but if not, please speak to me at the end, or put in the question and answer at the end, and I'll signpost you to somewhere where there is some answers or some guidance and some support in terms of developing that area forward. So what are our barriers? So as a school leader, one of our barriers are, we have unidentified needs that come in from primary schools. That transitional period is really key for those professionals that are working in kind of year 5, year 6, going into kind of year 7. If we don't know the child's needs straight away and we haven't got that information, it becomes a real difficult task to ensure provision is put in place straight away and that children are feeling supported from the start. Unmet needs. So a lot of when I say unmet needs, I mean needs that are not identified at the point of we've got no diagnosis, we potentially have children that are masking and that are really struggling in school and are holding it together, but then at home they really cannot they can't process that, and it becomes quite a difficult home environment. One of our other barriers is staff time, and the levels of staff that we have in ratios and the amount that staff are having to do in terms of duties and having that free time, it becomes really difficult. Poor staff understanding and knowledge. So some staff haven't got the understanding of children's needs, and that becomes really difficult when you're trying to plan and prepare. Poor parental support, so that can work in both ways. So I've had experiences with parents that do not want their child to be on the SEN register, do not want a label for their child, do not want to engage whatsoever, because they are stuck, unfortunately, which is really sad, with having a special education need presents a stigma for their child, and that's really sad, and that's a real challenge to overcome as a professional. But then we also have the other side of it, where we have got parents that are happy for the support, but then unfortunately don't take the children to speech and language appointments or CAMS appointments, and then they get discharged from external services. And as we all know at the moment, external services the waiting lists are very long, so that becomes a bit of a challenge if you discharge from that as well. Poor staff culture, and what I mean by this is changing that mindset of the old school staff about special educational needs. That's a real challenge for from school leaders, and making sure that you are a fully inclusive school and everybody is working from the same kind of ethos and has the same vision. Rigid and inflexible behaviour policies, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, but ensuring that if a child has needs, there is a flexible alternative. So for an example, what we do in my current school, if we have a child that has had a detention for something that is non-need related, we then will have a restorative conversation. So they will still have that time where they are with a one-to-one with an adult, and they'll go through the behaviour, they'll go through their point of view, and they'll unpick that and hopefully put plan in place for how they would respond next time to reduce. And it is about educating, and I will kind of touch upon that a little bit more a bit further on. And then communication is secure at all levels. So heads of year, parents, parental engagement, other teaching staff, and ensuring that communication is given and everybody is aware of needs, everybody is aware of expectations as well. And that's really key. So need behaviour versus chosen behaviour, and I use this term quite a lot, and I use it with the young people that I work with as well, because what I mean by need behaviour is a behaviour that is triggered by their special educational need, and it cannot be helped. It might be an impulsive behaviour if a child's got ADHD. It could be a speech and language need in terms of the way that they respond, or if they're quite literal in terms of their communication back. And then it goes to versus chosen behaviour. And what I mean by chosen behaviour is a behaviour that can be controlled by the young person. So, and what is the biggest barrier when it comes to need behaviour and chosen behaviour is the identification, and you don't always get that right. I've worked in my field for a long time, and I sometimes don't always get that right, but it is identifying actually that behaviour could have been done differently by that young person, and it's nothing to do with they have a special educational need, and having that high expectation that if you are showing a need behaviour, that we're not going to say, oh, but he's got special educational needs, so we're not going to sanction them, or we're not going to we're going to have the same discussion. We're going to have actually there will be a consequence for your actions, because in life there will always be a form of consequence. However, we will then still have that restorative and that reflective work to go side by side with that. So it's just really key that when we're having expectations in classrooms, we don't lower our expectations for our SEND learners. Everybody should have the same opportunities and the same expectations and high expectations, because it doesn't mean that our children with special educational needs cannot be successful or as successful as others without special educational needs. But what I would say is make sure you are very aware of that need, and make sure you are having that dialogue with that young person in a very structured way that they can understand as well. So strategies before the classroom. So this is based on before I walk into any classroom, if I know I might have some young people in there who might have some challenging behaviours, the first thing I need to do as a practitioner is plan for all them needs in that classroom. That might include seating plans. Where is the best place for that child to be sat? The environment is a real key. I know that if I'm in my office and my office is really messy, that I can't process. I really struggle to focus. That I could be on the phone to a parent and I'm thinking that pile needs moving. So really think about the environment that you're working in, and hopefully you'll have a nice, clean, ready to learn environment that all learners can access. And then the work level. And what I mean by that is making sure we're pitching at the right level. So just because a child has special educational needs doesn't mean that they need their work adapting all the time. They might need differentiated, scaffolded work. However, it might be that you're not challenging them enough. That high expectation is not there enough, and they might be getting bored. I've got a young person at the moment who's currently in year 8. He is a very academic boy, does have ADHD, and he gets bored so easily if he's not got lots of different tasks to then carry on with. He can't do wait time. He can't wait for the rest of the class to catch up. He needs to be having that separate challenge and that stretching challenge. So just be mindful of the young people in your class, and if you have little kind of activities and brain break activities that you can give to students to keep them engaged throughout and prevent that behaviour, because behaviour will then become this young person. If he's not challenged, he gets bored, and then he starts distracting people and distracting himself, and that's where his behaviour then starts to show. But if I keep him on task and we all keep him busy, then we don't see the behaviour appear. So that's really key. The next one is learn about your learners' needs and their barriers to learning. So if you don't know specifically a lot about that particular area of need, go and do some research. Ask your SENCOs, ask your professionals that are around you. Speak to the child, pupil voice and parent voice. You'd be surprised how articulate young people are about what they need in the classroom. And obviously it has to be reasonable, and it has to be kind of sometimes a compromise. But if they feel that their voice has been heard and you are saying, how can I help you? Then they feel straight away that they want to do well in your classroom, because you want them to do well, and you have that investment into their learning. This is a really key one. The next one is start every lesson with a fresh start. So fix anything that went wrong last lesson before the next lesson, and that can be really challenging to do because of time and finding that particular student. Or sometimes the barrier to that is the young person is quite rigid in their thinking, and they don't want to kind of, once they're holding a grudge and once they've fallen out with you, they don't want to kind of re-engage. So it can be a challenge, but it's so key that you as a professional make sure you're addressing that. It's a fresh start. It's forgotten about. I have forgotten about it. It's done. This lesson we're going to focus on this. Lots of reassurance. How we do it in our school is that if we have any altercations or anything that goes wrong in the lesson, there is an opportunity at the end of the day to fix that, for staff to go and meet with those children. And that is an expectation for all staff, that they have that conversation to make sure the next day is a fresh day. We do encourage staff to do that at social times as well, on duty, or even just even at any time throughout on the morning gate or before the next lesson. What we say to staff, if you've not had that opportunity to have that dialogue before the next lesson, before they come in and sit down and spend another hour in your class where they're feeling that the teacher doesn't like me, have that conversation at the door before, obviously not in public, just before, when everybody's gone in, just have that conversation that it's forgotten about, it's a new start, it's a new lesson, because that is when you start to build relationships. And my last one is building relationship with learners and earn their trust. Say hello on the corridors, on break duties, have that conversation about, oh, did you have a good weekend? What we do on our learning passport, so every child in our school, if they're on the SEN register, has a passport, which is a one-page profile. It has their strengths, the difficulties, and then strategies to overcome the difficulties, and then any important information that's needed. And what we specifically put strengths on there for a reason, strengths and likes, and that is as a bit of a conversation opener and as an opportunity for staff to build on those strengths. So an example of one is a young person in one of my classes this week is very good with responsibility. She likes having a job. So she knows now at the start of the lesson, she goes and gets the booklets for me. She hands them out. She knows how, she literally goes round and sets my classroom up for me. And she always turns up early as well now. But that having that sense of responsibility and she's earned my trust, because I know she's going to be there. I know she's going to set them up. And I've earned her trust because she knows that I'm invested in her education. It's made such an impact on her engagement in learning and her willingness to engage. So if you have a particular student that's struggling to access opportunities or different activities, it might be that you use that and take that away. So I noticed somebody said in the Reese in the chat, you said children unwilling to engage in activities. Potentially you could use that by having those children build and create those activities and do it as a bit of a working party. Oh, I really need your help. I really need you to help me develop this. To do it, we need you to learn about, and getting them involved in their own learning is a real key strategy to engage learners, because they feel that that's their work. Well, we've put time into it, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it well. So that might be a little strategy that you might use there, just to kind of encourage engagement and encourage enthusiasm and remove that barrier. So strategies in the classroom. So it's really, really clear that really key that you have clear and consistent routines in place. Some of our young people with special educational needs need consistency, need routine and structure. And some of our young people, I know some of my young people don't have that routine and clear expectations and structure at home. So in school, it's their safe space, and having that, we have a very blanket approach. Every lesson starts the same in the school. We have the same slide on every lesson. There's a meet and greet at every single classroom door. The expectation is the same from every member of staff. And having that start to the lesson and that structure allows some of our children with special educational needs to reduce their anxiety and their stress levels around what's coming next and what to expect. And like I said earlier, the behaviour is decreased because they're in that routine. They know what the expectation is, so they don't kind of have that opportunity to be unpredictable. Lessons are well planned and prepared for learners, and the needs are considered. My expectation from all my staff is that they look at the pupil passports and they know who their learners are before they enter the classroom, and they are considering what could go wrong, and they've got backup plans. So for example, in a food tech lesson, I had a conversation yesterday with one of our food technology teachers, and she said to me, it's not really necessarily a behaviour issue as such, but she said the young people are really struggling to they're getting frustrated because they can't cut as quick as everybody else. So then they're getting behind and they're getting rushed and they're getting stressed. So I said, right, okay, so is cutting the onions part of the assessment? Are they being assessed on that? So she said, no, not on that particular task. So I said, so why are we making them cut the onions? Why are we not pre-cutting the onions and removing that barrier for them at that point? And it was just that simple. Oh yeah, we could do that. I said, obviously, if the task it's part of the assessment is to cut the onions, then you do that as a separate assessment and maybe not as one. But I said, but if we just need to remove that barrier, we don't need them to cut the onions at that point. If they don't need to do it as part of their assessment and they can already do it because you've observed them doing it in the past, then move them on, remove that stress and that barrier. So things like that, just thinking about actually what is going to be difficult for a learner at that point. If there is a particular long writing task that you're expecting a learner to do and they can't do that because they've got movement breaks or they need movement breaks, maybe it's you're doing a section of that verbally and you're dictaphoning it and voice recording that entry. We should be allowing different opportunities for some of our learners to learn in different ways. We can't all, not every learner can learn in the same traditional way, so it's just being creative with how we do that. High expectations are set, but with reassurance and support given. So when I say high expectations, I don't say, nope, I don't mean you have to tell your class everybody has to do it and you just get on with it. It needs to be, I know you can do it. I'm going to support you to get there. It might take us a little bit longer, but we can do it and we'll do it together. And allowing students to have self-belief and allowing them to see that they can be successful and that those aspirations are there. And that's really, really key, because some of our learners, if they've had unmet needs or unidentified needs for so long, their resilience to their learning is very low and they give up very easily and they don't feel that they can do it. And that's really, I feel that's really sad. And I think that's something that as a whole profession, as professionals, we need to change that and reduce that, and allow learners to feel that they can do it. And there's lots of different ways you can do that. You can start really small with mastery tasks, so tasks that person enjoys and can do, and that boosts the confidence. So then you're going to increase that and scaffold that, so you're adding extra layers of new information and it's not too much and it's not overwhelming. So yeah, having those high expectations and allowing students to know that they can do it, but we might just have to scaffold it for them to do it in a different way. Use of clear language and check understanding of learners. This is really, really, really key when it comes to behaviour in classrooms, because behaviour is linked a lot with language and understanding of language and understanding of work. So for example, if you're in a classroom and the child does not understand the task, they will most probably either disengage, put the head on the table, slump down and give up, or they will distract themselves or distract others from the learning to have a bit of a facade and a bit of a distraction technique so it doesn't look like they can't do the work. It's really, really key that if you are speaking to a young person with special educational needs who might have, for example, speech and language communication needs or might need more processing time, that you're very clear with any consequences that are set or any instructions that are given. So what I say to my staff is, if you are giving a consequence for an action, you need to say, I am giving you this consequence because you have done this. You can fix it by doing this. And that gives them an opportunity. It gives them a very clear structure of what are they we're not happy about at the moment, what the consequence is going to be if they don't change their action, and then how. That is a real difficult challenge for some of our young people, is how are they going to change? They can't, sometimes they need adult support to do that, and encouragement of, this is how you can make it better, this is how we can move on. So just allowing that understanding and checking and using that really clear language. Give enough processing and wait time. You'd be surprised how much wait time makes a difference, and processing time makes a difference in a classroom. And sometimes I call it like the silent time is just, it's a little bit cringy, because you stood there and you're waiting and you're thinking, oh, have they finished yet? Or the silence is it's a bit deadly. You just want to move on, and you just want to get to the next part of the lesson. But actually allowing that processing time and wait time can make such a massive difference. What I'd recommend is, when you're given an instruction or you're given an amount of time that you think it'll take a young person to do a task, try and double it. At least try and double that time and just see the difference. Have a bit of a play with it, have a trial, see the difference. If you ask a question and you usually would give 10 seconds for the hands to go up, give 20 seconds and see how many more hands will go up. You will be surprised at the impacts that would have. A calm, nurturing environment is offered. So what I mean by this is, children pick up on atmosphere, children pick up on how you're feeling. There's been times I've gone into a classroom after very difficult meetings or being on duty, and I'm a bit rushed and a bit flustered, and children go, "Miss, are you okay?" And I know straight away they can pick up on my vibe, the way I'm feeling. So if I'm really mindful of how I go in, it doesn't matter what type of day I have, it doesn't matter what I've got going on at home, I go into that classroom and that's my escape. I purposely asked for more teaching this year, because being a SENCO, with those of you that might be SENCOs, it can be sometimes quite a stressful job, and I love being in the classroom with our young people. And I actually said that's my escapism. I can go into that classroom and I can be calm, I can be nurturing, and I'm there for the young people. So mirror how you want them to behave. You need to model that. You need to have those calm, nurturing, quiet kind of voices when you're speaking, and be really mindful about not shouting and not having that really abrupt, stressful kind of tone to your voice as well, which is sometimes difficult. I am aware that is difficult to do. Praise students' efforts and give encouragement. Praise goes such a long way. Like, even if they've done something, the smallest thing that you're just so proud of, make sure that they know that you've recognised it, because they'll do that again next time. Because being recognised for those good things will allow children to know that actually, if we're doing that more often, then we want to be good more often, rather than being recognised for something that's not gone right. And attention is attention. Sometimes some of our young people are crying out for attention, and we want to give them attention in the positive ways. So it can be the smallest thing. A young person yesterday had some time out, really was, I'm not going back into that lesson. I don't want to go into that lesson. And they was really stressed out. Something had happened at home. It had followed into school. They had time. We allowed them to have time to self-regulate, put a plan into place, and said, right, I need you now to go back to the lesson, to try that lesson. Staff was very aware of kind of the situation, and they was amazing and got a golden ticket in that lesson, and it was fantastic. Later on that day, I said 3 times at separate points, I'm so proud of you for going back in that this morning. You did it. You had a try. That's all we ask of you. And me reiterating that knows that next time it becomes really difficult, they're more likely to have a go and try it and go back in again. And then gain pupil voice and feedback, and don't be offended. What's not going right with my lessons? Like, what don't you enjoy? What do you enjoy? How do you learn? You might want to do that as a bit of a feedback question at the end of the term. What did you enjoy? And you'll find out what worked and what activities students enjoyed and what they didn't enjoy. And then you can just add more of what they enjoyed, and then you can compromise and say, okay, I'll do more of this, but we've got to make sure this section's really good. So I teach drama, and we do a lot of theory now with drama, which has changed over the years. But I like to still have them practical and practically learning on their feet. But they need to make sure they understand the theory and and my expectation in the lesson is that your work is to a high standard, and we don't just scribble because we want to get up and go and do some acting. That actually we've really thought about our learning as well, and the theory side of it. And so just gain that pupil voice, it's really, really beneficial. And there's strategies after the classroom. So again, the pupil voice, let learners know the voice is heard. So if something has happened and there's been a behaviour incident, sometimes their perspective is different due to their need, and they need some support in understanding the rights and the wrongs, or how they were perceived, or how their actions impacted others. That needs to be done in a really structured way with somebody who they feel safe with. Otherwise, it's not going to have an impact. So they might have a key worker, they might have a pastoral person who is really, really knowledgeable about their need. They also need to have that conversation, like I said, with their teaching member of staff to make sure that that barrier is kind of removed straight away, and the next lesson there's not going to be any incidents. Having an understanding of learners' behaviour and acknowledge it. So I understand why you behave that way, and I acknowledge how you were feeling. Like I said, it's really, really important that they feel that their voice is heard, and it's not just, this is unfair, nobody cares about me, nobody listens. I've heard that in my time quite a lot, and it's actually, no, I'm listening to your I want to hear your side of how, right, now let me educate you and let me tell you. And there's no right from wrong. Sometimes it's oh, actually, yeah, I could have dealt with that in a different way, but you could have dealt with that. And acknowledging that nobody's perfect. Sometimes situations happen in the classroom or outside the classroom that are not always, on reflection, that you might have been a little bit stern in that situation. You might have been a bit stressed, or your reaction time has not been what it previously would have been. So yeah, allowing that understanding, that's really key after a behavioural incident, to reduce it, because hopefully at that point, if they have an understanding of what they have done and you have addressed that, part of that conversation is, how can we do it different next time? What are we going to do differently? So then offer support and guidance to make the situation right. Some learners are unable to do this alone. Like I said, it might be that we need, how can we make this right? How can we address this situation? They might need support going to speak to that member of staff because they can't do it independently. They might need a little bit more guidance. They might need a little bit more time to reflect and self-regulate. They might be really angry about that circumstance, and they're not ready to have that conversation. So they might need processing time. It might be something you need to address the next day. Each child and each learner will be different. Ensure interventions in place if needed. So if you have and you've identified learners that need particular kind of anger management or behave, we have an intervention group called My ADHD and Me, and we've got a lot of young people that have been recently diagnosed with ADHD that haven't got an understanding of what it means. They don't really know, and they like to have those conversations, and it's a small group, it's in a very safe environment, but it's discussing, like, everybody's different, even if they've ADHD comes in all shapes and forms. And that's been a real success in terms of reducing some of our behaviour incidents, because they've got a better understanding of themselves. And some of our young people, if they're getting diagnoses in year 7 or 8 and they're 11, 12, 13, they've not got the knowledge of what that means. And it is about educating not only themselves but their peers and everybody around them, to make sure and celebrate that their need is nothing that they should be ashamed of, and it's not a stigma, and changing that whole school culture is really, really key. Support, I've already touched on support and guidance in restorative conversations. Educate on behaviour, I've spoken about, and then still have high expectations because you care. And I say that so many times, why am I doing this? And I make my young people say to me, because you care, because you want me to do well, because you want me to be successful. And I say, and because I know that you can be successful, and because I'm not going to allow people to give up on you, and I'm not going to allow yourself to give up. And sometimes that's what our young people need. They need just somebody there that has that really caring, nurturing encouragement around them. And then how can SENCO and SLT support? So you've got to ensure it's a whole school approach to apply to the behaviour policy, and reasonable adjustments are in place. So have a look at your behaviour policies in school, and then go back to your your SLT link for behaviour and sit down with them and say, okay, how can we make this a bit more special educational needs friendly? How can we put reasonable adjustments in place? What sort of things are we ensuring our staff are doing? And that's not lowering expectations, that's still having those high expectations, but it's reasonable adjustments. And it is those extra warnings. So, for example, if a child with ADHD is continuously disrupting the lesson, putting the hand up, shouting out, it's not straight away going down the behaviour policy of giving C1s, C2s, C3s. It might be having that conversation to say, I know you're finding it really difficult. I just need you to, or reminding them, brilliant answer, but next time, can you put your hand up for that one? And having that little bit of flexibility and that understanding that sometimes it cannot be helped and it doesn't have to be a strict and rigid as your behaviour policy looks. It just have to have those reasonable adjustments in place. Make sure as well that you quote legislation and make everybody aware that it's our duty of care to these young people to make sure we're giving them that flexibility. A robust referral system is in place to ensure that needs are correctly identified and addressed. That's really, really key. So in my provision, we have a trigger system. So if a child has a certain amount of detentions or a certain amount of referrals to our reflection room, then that is triggered and needs and testing is done to identify that we're not missing any underlying needs. And that's communicated and triangulated with parents and with ourselves. So that's really, really key to making sure that system and staff are aware of that system. So if they're having continuous difficult lessons with a certain student, have they done a round robin and spoke to other members of the school to see if that is that across the board? Is it just in your certain lesson? Can we unpick that further rather than just ignore it and think that's a difficult lesson? We've got to be unpicking behaviour and unpicking why that's occurring. Analysis of data to review and action. So making sure you're actioning anything that data that should be shared. Opportunities for staff and CPD trainings to understanding of knowledge. So making sure it's not standard in teacher training. We have a little bit of SEN training, but not enough in my opinion. And I feel like it is making sure that staff have that opportunity to develop their knowledge and ask those questions if they need to. Support for external resources and provisions when needed and if required. So are they allowing you to buy services in and allowed to ask for that kind of EP, speech and language, or even if it's an alternative provision and that's required and that's the best fit and that is for the child, have you got that support there from your senior leadership team? I'm not going to talk about high expectations, I've done that enough. And then learning what's to support culture and climate and whilst identifying staff needs. So if there's a particular child that's struggling in a certain area or a particular member of staff, I do weekly, at least 4 times a week, I'm out and about in lessons, observing. I follow certain children, I follow certain subjects, and I'm just identifying how can I support even further. And then we're getting to a bit of a reflection time now about actually from what I have said today, is there anything you've taken that you think actually, yeah, I can use that in my teaching, or I could use that in my parenting, or whatever setting that you're in? And think you don't have to write it down in the chat or anything like that. You can write it down to yourself, or you can just kind of have a think about one thing that you would change about your practice and how are you going to do that. So like I said, I did a training and I implemented wait time. I've doubled my wait time lessons, and the amount of engagement I've got from that has been incredible. It's been fantastic. So think about that. You can then link it back to the start of the session where I said, what is one of your concerns? And what is one of your behavioural issues that you have? And could you now suggest a strategy or an action that you're going to use from what I've discussed today to develop further going forward? If if you're thinking, no, I've still got an issue that I don't know, you've not answered my question, I don't know how I'm going to fix this one, it's continuous, please put it in the chat and we can discuss it as a group if you want to, or you have got my contact details at the end, so you can ask at the Q&A session or privately if you want to do that as well. So now it's an opportunity. I'm just going to give you a bit of an opportunity to ask some questions, and hopefully if I can answer them I will, and if not I'll go away, I'll find some answers and come back to you. So if you do want to ask any questions, you can pop them into the chat and hopefully I can answer some. And I'll just give you a couple of minutes to write those down. And then, like I said, if not, I've got my contact details at the end that you can contact me directly if you would like to as well. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any. I can't see any questions in the chat, which is hopefully a good thing, because hopefully I've answered or give you some food for thought, some things to think about. Obviously it is being recorded, so you can go back over it and kind of look at the slides separately. But I have got my contact details there. That's my personal email address and my Twitter as well. So you're more than welcome to add me on Twitter, and you can just direct message me if you've got any questions or if there's anything that I can support with or you'd like to. I'm more than happy for people if they'd like to come into my school. I'm quite happy to do that, or have conversations on the phone, team meetings. I am very passionate about supporting other professionals and gaining support. I probably learn a lot from other people as well. So I just think sharing knowledge is key in making a difference. And going back to the slide earlier about those rising numbers and rapidly reducing that number of behaviour incidents, suspensions and exclusions, that's something as a multi-academy trust we're really proud of. We have not done any permanent exclusions in the last, well, I've been here for 6 years and we've not done any for the last 6 years, and prior to that I know it was a couple of years before that. We are really passionate about being inclusive and finding alternative methods and alternative options into supporting our young children with their challenging behaviours and their needs. So thank you. I'm hoping that was helpful. Like I said, if you have got any questions at a later date, please use the recording to go over it, and if there is anything I can support with further, please let me know.